Thank you very much, Bob. It's good to have Bob and Rosemary back. Actually, I brought them back with me from the mountains. I figured they were up there long enough, needed to come back home, back down to earth. And we brought all this nice weather with us. Don't you like that? Do you appreciate it? Yeah. That's Bob, Rosemary, and I did that as we came south. It just created a vacuum as we moved south. And it's good to see you all again. It's always great to be back here. As Bob said, I think it's going on 20 years now, 2 or 3 times a year for 20 years. Actually, I've already told you everything I know. So if some of you have been here for over 10 or 15 years, with the exception of this morning, which is brand new, then you're hearing reruns. As one of my sons said when he was about 8 or 9 years old, after hearing a sermon I had preached several times, itinerant speakers do that, he said to my wife, how does Daddy choose what he's going to speak on? And she gave him some real spiritual answer like, well, he seeks the Lord and tries to find God's will. And my son said, yeah, and it's just my luck to hit the reruns. At least this morning you won't hit a rerun, because we're going to talk this morning about the Nation of Islam. Louis Farrakhan and his group were in the news recently. They attracted to Washington, D.C. The park police say 400,000, just under 500,000. Some say 1.2 million. Whatever the number was, it was one of the largest crowds ever in the history of our country. Perhaps only the Vietnam War march exceeded it. And the Nation of Islam is the religion that is espoused by Louis Farrakhan, and I think it behooves all of us to understand something about it. Not too long ago, we wrote a book called Answering Islam, and in that book, Answering Islam, we talked about traditional Orthodox Islam, what they believe and how Christians should respond. In fact, next week we're having a conference on Islam at First Baptist Church of Atlanta. If you want to just jump up there for Friday and Saturday and join us. My co-author and I, who is a converted Muslim, Abdul Salib, which means servant of the cross, will be putting on a conference on what Muslims believe. What do the Nation of Islam believe, and how influential has Islam been in the black community? It's estimated that 60 to 90% of all converts to Islam in America are coming from the African American community. In fact, according to Christianity Today, a couple years ago, by the year 2020, over half of all blacks will be Muslim in the United States. That's an incredible figure when you remember that almost 100% of blacks have been Christian down through the years, and yet Islam has made a tremendous inroad into the black community, and it's not going to decrease after last Monday. It's going to continue to increase. So it's to our advantage. Indeed, it's a necessity that we ask questions. Who are they? What do they believe? Who are their leaders? And how should we respond to it? I want to begin by asking the question in this hour, who are they, and how do Orthodox Muslims respond, and how can we evaluate them? And in the second hour, what do they believe, and what are the dangers of this movement? First of all, who are the Nation of Islam? The founder was a man named Wallace Fard Muhammad. He appeared in Detroit in 1930 and declared that he had come from the holy city of Mecca with the mission to teach blacks the truths about whites. He instructed blacks to prepare for the Battle of Armageddon, which he interpreted to mean the final confrontation between blacks and whites. As a matter of fact, he was heavily influenced by the Jehovah's Witnesses, who had an emphasis upon the Battle of Armageddon and some of the other teachings that we'll see. He claimed that he had been born in Mecca from Muhammad's tribe of Quraysh. And that's an interesting thing that we'll point to later. If he was born in Mecca from Muhammad's tribe, then he was not black, he was white, because Arabs are not black. Arabs are, as you know, from the broad Semitic strain. He established the first temple of Islam in the 1930s. He taught that Allah is God, the white man is the devil, and that he was the Messiah, to kind of abbreviate his teachings, and we'll go into that in more detail in the second message. Allah is God, the white man is the devil, and he was the Messiah. He used Jehovah's Witness literature to attack the Trinity and the deity of Christ, and so that Jesus was just a man, according to Wallace Bard Muhammad. There was a God, Jesus was just a man, there is no Trinity, and of course he denied the deity of Christ. Between 1930 and 1933, Fard recruited 8,000. That was a rather rapid growth at the very beginning of the movement. 8,000 people recruited. He recruited one person named Elijah Poole, who was the son of a Georgia Baptist minister. And after hearing Fard, Elijah Poole said, "I know who you are God himself." Fard responded, "That's right, but don't tell it now. It's not yet time for me to be known." So he was actually claiming to be God, and when Elijah Poole said, "I know who you are," he said, "Yes, that's right. I am God in the human flesh, but don't tell anyone now. Reveal that a little bit later." He was called the chief minister of the Nation of Islam. In June 1934, Fard vanished as mysteriously as he'd arrived. He came from nowhere, and he seemingly went into nowhere. Some believe that Elijah had him killed so that he could take over the movement. Whatever, he's gone. And Elijah Muhammad became the leader for the next 41 years. Now, after spending 4 years in prison, 1942 to 1946, Elijah Muhammad was viewed by his followers as a great martyr for the cause of Islam, and it actually helped the movement to grow. Enter Malcolm X. He was converted to the Nation of Islam in prison in 1947. He received his X, which signifies unknown identity associated with his African origin, that replaced his slave name. The slave name was what we would call his Christian name when he was converted, and so he was called Malcolm X, X for the unknown African origin, and of course Malcolm for his new name as he was converted to Islam. Between 1952 and 1964, under the leadership of Malcolm X, the membership in the Nation of Islam skyrocketed. He was a tremendous business person. He had tremendous leadership qualities and charisma. Most of the 100 temples were established during that period, the 100 temples that are temples of Islam. He also used Jehovah's Witness literature, including the fact that the world would end in the 1970s. The Jehovah's Witnesses have said that Christ would return at many different times, 1914 to 1970, and he was using Jehovah's Witness literature not only to deny the Trinity and the deity of Christ to biblical doctrines, but to say that Armageddon was coming and to date the second coming, which Jesus forbid us to do, saying no one knows the day or the hour, the times or the seasons when he will return. He visited Mecca. And in 1964, after Malcolm X had visited Mecca, and he saw true Muslims, and he was impressed by them, he decided to become a true Muslim, the Nation of Islam being a heretical sect of Islam. And he came back and he announced that he was going to leave the Nation of Islam in a famous 1964 speech. He said that his faith in Elijah Muhammad was shaken because Elijah Muhammad admitted to him that he was guilty of the paternity suits that were filed against him. And when he found that Elijah Muhammad was siring children by someone else and had admitted his own guilt, this shook his faith in Elijah Muhammad, combined with going over to Mecca and seeing true Islam, and he found out that the doctrines that Elijah Muhammad was teaching were contrary to true Islam. And his wife later said of Malcolm X after this experience, Quote, he went to Mecca as a black Muslim and there became only a Muslim. He felt all men were human beings and we must judge a man on his deeds. In other words, he rejected the racist teaching of Elijah Muhammad that the white men were devils, repudiated that, said that's not part of true Islam, and was converted to true Islam. Shortly thereafter, he was shot. Shortly thereafter, he was killed. In fact, in less than a year, on February 21st, 1965. Many believe, of course, that Farrakhan is directly or indirectly responsible. We'll say more about that later, but he was killed. And then about 10 years later, February 25th, 1975, Muhammad Elijah died of congestive heart failure, and Wallace Dean Muhammad was named his successor the very next day. Now, this was a surprise to many people that he was named his successor because he had been excommunicated by his father on 3 previous occasions from the group, mainly for rejecting the deity of Fard, that Fard was God. But he quickly made some significant changes in the movement. First of all, he renamed the group from the Nation of Islam to the World Community of Al-Islam in the West. Later it was changed to American Muslim Mission. He rejected the belief that Fard was God in human flesh. He altered the view that God was black and whites are devils. He called this a necessary transition belief because of black brainwashing as slaves. It's a lie that needed to be told to them at that time to help them to get out of that brainwashed condition. And since 1975, Orthodox Muslims have accepted it as an Orthodox Muslim group. Now, mind you, it's called the World Community of Al-Islam, or later the American Muslim Mission, and there are over 100,000 members in it, and they are now accepted as true Muslims. Enter Louis Abdul Farrakhan, who was known as Louis Eugene Walcott before that. He was born in 1933. He was a college dropout and a former singer. He sang in nightclubs. He was called Calypso Gene and was actually a very good nightclub singer, also an excellent violinist. He played Mendelssohn to a largely Jewish crowd in New York just a couple years ago. Quip by the Jewish community was, we won't be pacified by someone who plays a converted Jew to us, because Mendelssohn had later become a Christian. At any rate, his life, Louis Farrakhan's life, was changed when he met Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a powerful figure, great charisma, and he served under Malcolm and succeeded him actually at the Harlem Mosque. Now, the Harlem Mosque is the second largest Muslim mosque in the United States, and so anyone who is the head of that is a very powerful person. Farrakhan broke from Wallace Dean Muhammad in 1976. He decided that he would retain the original name, and he went back to the name Nation of Islam, revived that name, and made some changes back to the original beliefs. In other words, he rejected the revisions that had come in the movement that caused them to be Orthodox Islam again, and he went back to the original unorthodox beliefs. He and his followers have subsequently been known as the Nation of Islam. He didn't like these changes. He was and is, quote, the national spokesman for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's the official title that he uses. Farrakhan was relatively unknown in the wider community until about 1984, when he supported Jesse Jackson's presidential bid. Now, Jackson, you remember, was criticized by the Jewish community when he used the derogatory term Haimi of Jews. And Farrakhan entered the scene and said this, quote, if you harm this brother in the name of Allah, that will be the last one you do harm, end quote. So he flexed his muscle on the scene, entered, and of course he's been in the national spotlight ever since, culminating in 19 1895, this great march of the Million Man March on Washington. He's the leader of the Nation of Islam, and it's nearly the same in doctrine and spirit to what it was under Muhammad Elijah. And you remember some of the great African Americans became converts during this period, including Muhammad Ali, who was a convert to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Farrakhan is then the leader of the Nation of Islam. He no longer calls for a separate state. The original beliefs were that they wanted a separate section, some say the eastern section of the United States, to set up a black separate state, and then the whites could have west of the Mississippi. Others called for just a certain section of states. More recently, he's alluded to perhaps some African state. It is still separatistic, but not quite as separatistic as it was in the beginning. He stresses the need for their own economic independence. This is probably what has catapulted him into the headlines recently because of the success the Nation of Islam has had in black communities in helping them to lift themselves by their own bootstraps economically. And they have an annual Savior's Day. It was moved from February 26th, which was Fard's birthday, to October 7th, which is Elijah Muhammad's birthday, and on this date they have a national celebration. Farrakhan has been married for 36 years to Khadijah. He has 9 children. He lives in a mansion with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a fountain. I've seen pictures of him inside there playing his violin to his children, entertaining them. And he has a rather ascetic life. Muslims, at least the black Muslims, the Nation of Islam, demand that you, 1, eat no pork, drink no alcohol, have 1 meal a day, which is kind of an extension of the traditional Islamic fasting during the month of Ramadan. He is someone who stresses family values and therefore has a great appeal to many from the Judeo-Christian tradition because there's an overlap in some beliefs there. 2 months before Malcolm X was assassinated, here's what Farrakhan said, quote, "Only those who wish to be led to hell or to their doom will follow Malcolm. The die is set and Malcolm shall not escape. Such a man as Malcolm is worthy of death." Now, it seems to me the minimum you can say by way of commentary on this is that he certainly set the stage for Malcolm's death. He certainly poisoned the waters. He certainly created an atmosphere in which it was more likely that someone would get together a squad and assassinate Malcolm, whether he was directly responsible or whether he engaged a squad. Nobody knows, but at least he bears some responsibility for that. Meanwhile, he started a group called the Fruit of Islam. Now, the Fruit of Islam are the military branch of the Nation of Islam. They sometimes patrol the streets. In certain large cities, they will come in and patrol the streets without guns, but they're trained, highly trained in hand-to-hand combat, and they're highly successful. In many areas, as we'll give some quotes later, people are indeed grateful for the Nation of Islam coming in and cleaning up the drugs and kicking out the druggies and making it a better place to live. He has a newspaper, and his newspaper is called The Final Call. I have a copy of it, and I picked it up from people on the way to our radio program. They're usually on the streets selling it. And The Final Call has a little bit of a JW flavor to it. Namely, Armageddon is coming. This is the final call. Get ready for the great last battle between blacks and whites, in which blacks will become the superior race again as they were in the original, and those who are still alive have a chance to get on the right side. Now I'm going to go into detail of what they believe more in the next service, so I'd just like to move now to how does this group relate to Orthodox Islam, what accounts for their growth, and how can we evaluate it? Well, as far as Orthodox Islam is concerned, they have been denounced. They have been excommunicated. They have been anathematized. because of the deification of Wallace Fard. An Orthodox Muslim believes that there is one God, only one God. There aren't even three persons in God, as the Trinitarians hold, such as we are, and that everything else is a creature. All the angels, all human beings. Muhammad was just a human being, and there is no person who could possibly be God, according to Orthodox Islam. So for Fard to claim to be God, and for his followers to claim to be God, as Farrakhan and others do, is blasphemy. So the deification of Fard is rejected. The denial of an afterlife. It's rather strange that the movement is very humanistic. It's humanistic in this sense. They deny that human beings have a life after death. Now, very few religions in the history of the world have ever denied life after death. I mean, even the great Greek polytheistic and Egyptian cultures all believed in some kind of life after death. But not according to the Nation of Islam. There is no life after death. There is no resurrection. The resurrection is just a spiritual event. The resurrection means the restoration of blacks to the superior place in society. And so he denies an afterlife. He denies that the prophet Muhammad is the last of prophets. Now, you can get away with a number of things and still be an Orthodox Muslim. You cannot get away with saying any human being is God and denying that Muhammad was the last of the prophets. That is indeed the heart of Islam. There have been many prophets, maybe as many as 25,000 prophets in the history of the world, according to Orthodox Islam. But Muhammad is the last of the prophets. He's the sum and the last of the prophet. For someone to come after him, like Baha'u'llah, the head of Baha'i, or the founder of Baha'i religion, that's blasphemy, and somebody like Elijah Muhammad as well. And of course, the Orthodox Muslims reject the Nation of Islam because of their racism and hatred. They're opposed to saying that one group or another is superior, whether whites or blacks, and opposed to any hatred and animosity between the races. And as I mentioned, Malcolm X was killed after he converted to Orthodox Islam, so they're very strong in this belief. Now, in the light of that history and how they're related to Orthodox Islam, namely an unorthodox group not accepted by them, what accounts for their growth? Why has this Nation of Islam grown so quickly? And why is it that as many as 2/3 of blacks in America have sympathies to the message of Farrakhan? Even though it's still a small fraction of the total black population, though growing rapidly, most blacks sympathize with, and obviously most of the people who were at the march, whether 400,000 or 1.2 million, were not part of the Nation of Islam. They were others. Many Christians, Baptists, and others were there. What accounts for their growth? Number one, the failure of the Christian church. The failure of the Christian church. The failure to integrate the Christian church. Sunday, 11 o'clock a.m. is still the most segregated hour in America. And I think that what is true of the other cults, Walter Martin once said that cults live on the unpaid bills of the church. Where we neglected something, a cult came in and took over, and if there had not been that injustice, if there had not been that racism, there would not have been the fertile soil for this kind of movement to grow. So we have ourselves to blame for Louis Farrakhan and the movement because we failed to integrate the church. When you look back to the history of black-white relations in America, we cannot forget that the Dred Scott decision, 7-2 by the Supreme Court, said they weren't even persons. They weren't even persons protected by the Constitution. It took 11 years in a civil war to overthrow that. To help meet the needs of the black community, we have also failed. As a Christian church, as a whole, we have failed to meet the needs of the black community. We have failed to educate black leadership. Now, Martin Luther King was a tremendous leader. In fact, without even taking a vote, I'm sure that if the black community were asked to vote, that they would vote for Martin Luther King over Farrakhan as their model and leader. He was reared in an evangelical church, preached an evangelical gospel, but no evangelical seminary offered him a scholarship, and he went to a liberal seminary and became liberal. We failed to educate the black community. We failed to reach the black community. We have the most segregated hour at 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. And we've also failed to demythologize the Aryan Jesus. Salmon's head of Christ. That couldn't possibly be the way Jesus looked. Number one, Jesus was Jewish, and that's not a Jewish face. We have made Jesus into an Aryan, as it were, and I think the failure to demythologize this Aryan myth has led a lot of blacks to have sympathy with those who attack Christianity as the white man's religion and then promote Islam as the black man's religion. Now we know they're equally wrong for doing that because Muhammad was not black, Muhammad was white, but at the same time they have bought into that myth because they have rejected the one that's perpetrated in a lot of Christianity. Also, I think what accounts for the growth of the Nation of Islam is not only a failure of the Christian church, but the desperate conditions of the Depression was a fertile soil for recruiting the first 8,000. Now, I was born during the Depression. My mother was very depressed, and I know how bad it was. I mean, we were so poor we ate our pet rabbit. I mean, that's poor. We raised rabbits because they ate grass, and you could eat the rabbits, better than eating the grass, right? We raised rabbits, and we ate our pet rabbit. Well, we didn't really eat. We cooked it, but couldn't eat it because we all stared at it. Nancy, there was Nancy. You see the pink eyes and the white hair. You can't eat Nancy, you know. But if you think we had it bad, my dad worked on the WPA digging ditches during the Depression. My uncle was a bootlegger. He used to bootleg whiskey in a hearse from Canada over to Detroit. So I'm not looking for any kings or noble people in my background. As the Apostle Paul says, not many noble, not many wise among you. But if you think we had it bad, you should see how the blacks had it during the Depression. It was just a fertile time for something like this to grow, for someone to come along and say, the white man is the devil, you really are gods in the superior race, you need to overthrow this. You can get 8,000 people in a few years on a message like that, and doomsday is coming just around the corner. It was just a fertile time for it to grow. Also, I think thirdly, racism in society and the church has spurred their growth. Unfortunately, since that time, racism has not died out in society. Many people think it has, but it has not. And the continued racism in the society, though it might be officially and legally out of date and unconstitutional, it has not been socially, practically, and economically implemented in our society. And all you need to do is look at the statistics to see that that's the case. Fourthly, the hurt and despair of black men in our society today is definitely a catalyst. 1 out of every 3 black young men is killed, dies, won't reach major adulthood age. There's a tremendous despair and a tremendous hurt in the black community, and that's been a further catalyst of Farrakhan. He just fans that in a very extreme racist way and produces a lot of results. Then in addition to that, fifthly, the success of Farrakhan's program. Nothing succeeds like success. And his program has had some significant success. For example, they have programs for prisoners, drug addicts, alcoholics, and street gang members. I'll be speaking in a major prison in California in a few months, and the guy who asked me to come out there has been trying to get me there for a long time. He said Islam is growing so fast in the prisons, and there are so many Muslims that it's just about sweeping the prison system. And as we all know, many famous blacks have been converted to Islam in prison, and many more are being converted as we talk today. They have a very successful program in prisons. In addition to that, they chase away crime and drugs in communities. The Washington chief of police, now if there's any place there's crime and drugs, it's there, said this, quote, "They want to operate outside the law, but they are undeniably effective. There used to be shootings all the time. Drug dealers used to surround my truck. The Muslims keep them away. Now, if you're in a desperate situation and your life is at stake and you're being surrounded by drug people all the time, you'd be thankful, too, for a black Muslim band that was going to keep them away. Then he has a program called Power. His program called Power is a program for the economic development, and it produces jobs for blacks. It's actually working. It's producing jobs and getting people off the streets into the factories. They have a Muhammad University in Chicago and Clara Muhammad School in Detroit. They've produced education. Farrakhan is very much behind educating blacks and very much behind producing economic progress. Furthermore, he has given them a new sense of dignity, a conviction that they were more than equals of the white man and are destined to rule the earth. Now, a little appeal to pride, a little appeal to racism, and he's elevated their sense of dignity in themselves, and that has helped them to overcome the slave mentality and to become a productive part of society. It works, in other words. Furthermore, blacks are desperate for national leadership from their problems, and desperate people do desperate things. I heard one African American interviewed, and a lot of African Americans were put in a real dilemma as to whether to go to this march or not. We have a number of them in our seminary, and some of our students went. Some of them didn't go, but one young man who did go to the march said, look, Christianity is stronger than Islam. I'm not going to support Farrakhan. I'm going to support the blacks and to bring a focus to their problem and to say that Christianity is the solution. Desperate situations call for desperate measures. And when asked, well, then why are you going to do, and this was another man interviewed by the media, why are you going to support the march if you don't support Farrakhan? His answer was, we in the black community don't have as many choices for leadership as you do. And before we get too excited about the alleged superior leaders that we have, the main candidates that are running for both parties on both sides in the next election, who are most likely to be president, are not exactly winners. They remind me of my friend from Detroit, who comes from a black community, who's now a national leader, who said, when I asked him, who are you going to vote for in the next election? He said, sometimes it's like the choice between a known devil and a suspected witch. And when I have a choice like that, I vote for the suspected witch over the known devil. Well, that's exactly how blacks think in this situation. And then Farrakhan, I think, is growing because of the failure of liberal government programs that have kept blacks in economic dependency. Now, I know the Democratic Party doesn't like this, but the interesting thing is that what Farrakhan is saying to blacks and is working is basically what conservative Republicans have been saying for years. You need to get a job, you need to clean up your life, you need to pull yourself by your own economic bootstraps, you need to stop depending on government handouts. That just keeps you in further economic slavery. In my opinion, the Democratic Party as a whole, down through the years, has kept blacks in economic slavery since they were liberated from legal slavery. And that Farrakhan's program is working because he's saying what conservative Republicans have always said, and what many blacks who are now converting to a conservative Republican view, and by the way, there is a presidential candidate that I would vote for, and he's black. No, he's not Colin Powell. He happens to be Alan Key, and he happens to be a Republican candidate, and I would put him on the top of my list of all of the candidates, because the rest of them waffle, double talk about abortion and the right to life thing. To me, that's the number one issue. After all, we kill 4,300 babies every day, 1.5 million a year, just to remind you. And Alan Key has got a strong, clear message. Let's not do that. So Farrakhan's appeal is to point to a failure of a liberal government programs that have kept blacks in economic dependency. Finally, Farrakhan has an appeal of hate, begotten of hate. Hate against blacks has led to hate against whites. And that leads me to my criticism. And my criticism, number one, of Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam is that it's racist. In fact, it's the mirror image of the KKK. And the comparison I'm now going to give you comes from some notes by Robert Morey, a counter-cult leader. But listen to this comparison and see if it isn't correct. Notice the similarity between the Ku Klux Klan and the national Islam religion. Number one, self-proclaimed defender of the white man, KKK. Farrakhan, self-proclaimed defender of the black man, KKK. It began in times of racial tension. The Nation of Islam began in times of racial tension. Race has racist beliefs and a racist agenda. True of the KKK and the national religion of Islam. KKK, self-styled defender of Christianity, but it denies what Christianity teaches. Nation of Islam, self-styled defender of Islam, but denies what Islam teaches. KKK, it's condemned by Christians. National religion of Islam, condemned by Muslims. KKK, use Christian symbols such as the cross. Nation of Islam uses Muslim symbols such as the crescent moon. KKK claims to believe in the Christian God. The Nation of Islam claims to believe in the Muslim God. KKK claims to honor Jesus Christ but denies what he taught. Same thing with Farrakhan's group. Claims to honor Muhammad but denies what he taught. KKK uses Christian names when you're converted. Use Muslim names when you're converted. KKK, wear Christian costumes, pointed hoods and gowns. The Nation of Islam wears Muslim costumes, skull caps and gowns. KKK uses racist slurs against black people, niggers, coons, etc. The Nation of Islam uses racist slurs against white people, devils, honky, etc. KKK has a special hatred for Jews. Nation of Islam, special hatred for Jews. KKK uses fear, intimidation, and violence to get its way. Nation of Islam uses fear, intimidation, and violence to get its way. KKK preaches segregation of the races. Farrakhan preaches segregation of the races. KKK wants a white-only country. Farrakhan wants a black-only country. Now, if these two organizations are mirror images of the other, you've got one form of racism breeding another form of racism. That's my first critique of the Nation of Islam. Secondly, I would suggest that it is a white man's religion. You say, what? It's a white man's religion. Who was the founder? The founder was a white man that succeeded in deceiving enough black people to believe that he was God. That's just another great deception that some white man has perpetrated on black men, because who's being worshipped? Fired. Who was fired? He was a white man. So it's a white man's religion that's deceiving black men again. Furthermore, thirdly, it's not Islamic. It doesn't deserve the title Islamic. Now, I'm not a Muslim, and as you know, having written the book Answering Islam, I have no brief in favor of Islam. But I'll say this, it's light years ahead. Malcolm X was right. Malcolm X was right when he was moving a step in the right direction when he moved away from the Nation of Islam and back to true Islam, because true Islam teaches that there's only one God. They teach that God created the world. They teach that we're just creatures. They teach that all races are one and equal. They do not teach racism. Furthermore, I would say that it's the direct antithesis of Martin Luther King. I think the black community today has basically a choice, and the choice is Farrakhan versus King. Look at last week's Time magazine. Last week's Time magazine has, I noted, a anonymously written article, 1 million minus 1. It was talking about the Million Man March. And who's the minus one? Minus Martin Luther King, because everything that Farrakhan stands for is diametrically opposed to what Farrakhan stands for. Here's what Martin Luther King said: "Do not judge us by the color of our skin, but judge us by the content of our character." And here comes Farrakhan saying, judge us by the color of our skin, not the content of our character. So it's a white man's religion. It's not truly Islamic. It's racist. It's separatistic. Can you believe that we've worked all of these years now since the Dred Scott decision to make progress for integration, for considering all people on an equal level, like the Declaration of Independence said, apart from the color of their skin, and now we have someone who is saying, let's separate. Let's go into supreme isolation. I don't think separatism is the solution to our problem, nor do I think, fifthly, that teaching the supremacy of any race, whether white or black, and is the Nation of Islam is teaching supremacy. It's teaching black supremacy, because what is the cause of our problem? The white men are devils. What is the solution to our problem? When will the nation of oppressed people be resurrected spiritually? When the black man becomes supreme again in society as he was to begin with. Now let me conclude with two statements. One, what is the real problem? And two, what is the real solution? The real problem in America today is not the color of skin, but the nature of sin. The real problem is not the color of skin, but the nature of sin. There are white crimes and black crimes. You know, we have the so-called ghetto crimes, and then we have the white-collar crimes. And one of the things that blacks resent is that you can get away with white-collar crimes a whole lot easier than you can get away with ghetto crimes. And there is an injustice in our system. It's not the color of skin, it's the nature of sin. Underneath the color of skin, there are fallen, depraved human beings. The Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and sin doesn't come in colors. Sin is colorblind, and we are all equally sinful before God. Secondly, the solution. If the problem is not the color of skin, but the nature of sin, what's the solution? It's not race, it's grace. We're all sinners, and we need the grace of God. We're all sinners, and Christ died not just for the white race or the black race. He died for the world. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So the problem is sin, and the solution is not race, it's grace. We need God's grace. We need forgiveness. We need to unite these barriers, over these barriers that have separated us. We need to be brought together, red and yellow, black and white. We sang all are precious in his sight. I taught in the 1960s, started in the 50s, I taught at the most integrated Christian school in America at that time, Detroit Bible College. We had 500 students, and we had probably about 300 blacks from Detroit as students. During that time period, I was preaching in a very well-known church like this one, a Bible-believing church in the area, and I invited one of my black students to come to hear me, and I wanted to talk to him after. And I saw him sometime later, and I said, let's call him Bob. I said, Bob, why didn't you come? He said, I did. I said, I didn't see it. He said, when I came in the door of this nice church just like this one, when I came in the door, somebody said, oh, we have a special place for you, and they sat him in the nursery. And he spent all the time behind glass in the nursery viewing the service. It's kind of hard for those of us who aren't black to appreciate the racism in our society. I was preaching at another church in Chicago, a fine church in the south side. It was kind of what I called the white-collar overflow from Jack Hyles' church. People who couldn't handle that situation came and started their own church. And after a few Sundays, I noticed that there weren't any black faces around. And I asked someone, and I wish I hadn't asked, because I had to cancel my next speaking engagement there. They had a policy that excluded blacks. I didn't the speaking engagement. I said, that was my last speaking engagement there, because they were still, and this is 1970s, excluding blacks from their service. It's not race, It's grace. And the only thing that's going to overcome that, those prejudices, those sins that have been embedded in our culture, is the grace of God that transcends those kind of barriers and brings us together. Neither Jew nor Gentile, neither bond or free, all one in Christ Jesus. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your marvelous message of love and grace. And we know the grace of God has revealed itself, and it teaches us to deny ungodliness. Help us to see that racism of any kind, of any variety, is ungodly, is contrary to the image of God, contrary to your nature, contrary to your program for the church. And so we look to you today to help us by your grace to overcome the problems of race. In Jesus' name, amen.